Welcome everybody to our online sessions here as part of the Bands at the Conservatory online during COVID-19. We all know what a bizarre world we're living in these days, and we're trying to make the best as professors and teachers all around the world to give the best experiences to our students. And while we're online, Joe and I have been thinking about what we could do to illuminate and offer amazing opportunities for our students here at the conservatory. But in doing so, we realize the applicability of these towards just the general population at large. So we decided to bring these to the world. And we want to thank you for spending some time with us. We know that you do not have to do that. Today, we're going to be talking about chamber music, one of our 11 topics that we're coming to you here from Kansas City. And I'm going to toss this over to my amazing friend, Dr. Parisi here at the conservatory. We've been colleagues for 15 years and we're thicker than thieves and essentially brothers. And I just want to send it right over to Joe.
Thanks so much. We are really fortunate to be at a university where our professors who have full-time jobs spend a lot of time performing as well. And the people that you see before you, Michael, Keith, and Jane, have all done tremendous work in various arenas in chamber music, from producing their own albums and creating their own commissions to playing at Aspen festivals, being on boards of summer festivals. The list goes on. And what's remarkable about this is we were able to ask over 100 students of ours that are transitioning to this pandemic experience what questions they would think would be most relevant to this very astute and well-versed panel. And we've decided to take some of those questions, and especially the ones that came to the forefront the most, and have our panel share them with you. So Michael is a cellist, Keith is a trumpeter, and Jane is a clarinetist, and all of them in their own right are exceptionally well regarded for what they get to do. But Steve and I know I echo this for him, feel that we have the greatest colleagues in the world, and so thankful that you would take the time to spend this evening, afternoon, whenever you folks are watching it, with us. But just know that this is the first one off the ground, and we really appreciate your energy and commitment to our world in the bands at the conservatory. So we're going to start with some questions, and feel free to, we'll tag each one of you, and then we can elaborate as we go on. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Welcome, guests. We're so delighted to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Question number one, I'm going to send this to you, Mike. So we'll start with this. And the one, and again, we had 100 questions asked, and these have all received many, many requests. So we're hoping they're going to love them. And we thought we'd start with something very joyful because question number two is not.
And I get that one. Thank you.
Question number one is, what are some of the facets of playing chamber music that make it so unique and enjoyable, that also distinguish it from other mediums of our art form, such as large ensemble playing or solo playing? Mike?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really hits to the heart of why I fell in love with chamber music in the first place, and probably why I'm in the music business. Really gravitated towards chamber music for a lot of those facets. One of them being working with other people and collaborating in an intimate way. Obviously, orchestra, you work with other people, but it's not as much an intimate way because of the larger numbers. And as a soloist, you work with other people, but again, it's, as we all know, the soloist, if you're playing, for example, with orchestra, there's a brief experience that they get to rehearse, and it's not really, maybe there's some intimate connection between the conductor and the soloist, but other than that, it's not the same kind of collaboration. And I started with collaborating with my brothers, actually, and my parents. We all played music together when I was a kid, and so that felt really natural. And then when I went to college, I was in many groups, actually. It's kind of difficult to say no to anyone who had asked me to be in a group. I think I was in 5 and had to drop 1. So, but that was really just because I loved it so much. And after my first performance, in my freshman year, my teacher came up to me and said, "You should really consider a career in chamber music." And I didn't really know what that was. He said I wouldn't make any money. I had no idea what that was. Now I know what it is, and I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that during this session. So some of the facets of chamber music that are wonderful is as I hit on already, it's that communication with people and the sharing of ideas and bringing them to fruition. Um, some of the other things I liked about it is the spontaneity that you're able to have in performing. I think a finely tuned group can rehearse for something, but then also be free in the performance. And that's something that's difficult to do, though perhaps possible in the orchestra, but very rare and very difficult. And with solo, maybe the soloist is free all the time, and we're just always playing tag. But but I think with the chamber ensemble, you're able to achieve this really high level of spontaneity, where it seems like it was actually prepared that way. So that's exciting in itself. Just to actually get to that point takes a lot of experience and finesse. But those are some of the main reasons why I like it, and some of the differences between the different genres.
Keith, Jane?
You know, another thing that I was thinking of while Mike was talking, he was talking about the intimacy of the contact with the other musicians, which is totally true, and I think is one of the things that really appeals to us. Another part of that intimacy is the idea that we get to sort of craft our own statements much more ourselves, or at least as a smaller group effort, rather than sometimes being told what you're going to do, which is, you know, there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, in fact, sometimes it's wonderful to have a wonderful conductor, you know, give an interpretation, and that can be very exciting. But this way you get to be a bigger part of that process. And the other amount of intimacy that gets created, I think, is between, in chamber music more than anything else, is between the musicians and the audience. Oftentimes it's a smaller venue, and the Chamber Music Festival that I've been involved with here in Kansas City for 20 some years now, which I just happened to sort of luck into on the ground floor, we always have these receptions after the concerts that have been very popular, and we invite the audience to come and you know, have a little snack, have a little drink with us, and chat with us. And we've gotten to know those people really, really well over the years. We know them by name. We know if they're not at a concert, maybe, you know, are we worried about them, or do we know if they're on vacation? Or so there are all sorts of different aspects to the intimacy of chamber music that I think you don't find in other modes of playing.
I was going to talk a little bit about the sort of democratic nature of the brass quintet world and the democratic nature of the duo that I'm in, the trumpet and organ duo. It's really fun to just turn to your friend or your friends and say, how do you want to do this? And then just have a discussion about, well, let's lead to this point, and then let's have a little pause, and then you try to play that. And some of the time you say, well, that was absolutely perfect, let's do it that way forever. And then some of the time you say, that was the worst idea you've ever had, let's try something else. And I really think that's just joy. It's just pure joy to get to do that with friends. Now, it's interesting. I know what the next question is. I'm going to let Joe ask that so we can talk about the dark side.
You've actually led right in that quite well. I mean, so this question came up in several different ways from our students. It's basically being in an environment with people, wanting to do the best you can, and then you may have a disagreement. And so I tried to encapsulate everybody's sentiment here, but basically they're saying, so how do you reach consensus regarding an interpretation of a piece from all members of a chamber ensemble if they disagree or have their own interpretation? And do you know of an instance that you could share where you maybe had to overcome that, or maybe even give strategies for our students to work through something like that? Because I know you all coach. So go ahead, Keith. I know you were talking about that. So
yeah. I mean, I always talk about, when I'm talking to students about brass quintets, when they're having these kinds of difficulties, because they're just going to happen. Musicians have strong opinions about what they think should happen, right? I mean, we're all strong individuals. And I've always compared a brass quintet to being like a 5-person marriage. And you have to basically just go through that 5-person marriage sometime and just compromise what you think for the good of society, you know, that small society. And, you know, brass quintets, we've had some hilarious things happen in Missouri brass quintet rehearsals in 30 years here, most of which I can't talk about, but Sometimes you just have to just give in. I mean, honestly, your idea about how far you should crescendo in this measure probably just isn't that important. And sometimes it's okay to just let somebody else's idea win if that's how you feel about it. And I think the biggest way to get out of these difficulties is to be the first person to give in, because it's just not that important. And if your idea, if you're that passionate about that crescendo, you better be able to present some rational reason for it, instead of just saying, I just feel like we have to get louder here over and over again, and saying it louder and louder, because that's just not going to work out for anybody. I can talk to you a little bit about my partnership with Melody, my organist, and this is honestly true. It sounds like a bad line, but the two of us have honestly never once had a disagreement about a musical decision in more years than, really, it's almost 40 years now, and we've never fought about anything. We've never fought about any kind of musical decision. And I think it really helped for the two of us to be friends first, but it also helps for the two of us to just respect each other enough to understand that if the other person's opinion is different than yours, just have enough respect for them to let them have that crescendo go their way. And I think that's the best way out of this. I mean, you don't have to stick to your guns. There's better hills to die on as a musician than whether that crescendo is going louder than you think it should or whatever. And sometimes you just have to kind of listen to somebody's opinions and go, okay, all right, we'll do it that way. That's fine. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't have the strength of your own feelings about things, but sometimes you just have to give. That's communication, musical communication at its best, to me.
Great points. Yeah, thank you. Mike, do you have anything you want to offer on that? Anything to add?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think my view on this question has changed over my entire career. Probably started off with, I'm right, you're wrong, and wound up where I am now, where what I realize is, because I've played a lot of ad hoc chamber music, so I've got regular groups where we know each other so well and we communicate so well, and everything can go smoothly. Even disagreements are just beautiful. But in ad hoc group, maybe playing with someone you've never played with before, yeah, I've learned a lot from that, because I realized that I might completely disagree with a suggestion someone has made, but I might learn a lot from it by trying it and trying to open my mind up to something that, why should I close it down? This idea could be amazing if I'm just able to assimilate it, So that's one thing playing lots of ad hoc chamber music gets you to learn, that this is actually, a disagreement can be an amazing experience if you learn something from it. And I've learned a lot from some amazing musicians.
Oh, that's a really great growth mindset.
Yeah.
That's all. I think our students could learn a lot from just thinking that way.
The other little story I wanted to just pop in at the end was when I was a student at Juilliard, Bobby Mann, who was the first violinist of the Juilliard String Quartet, held an open rehearsal with the Juilliard Quartet for students to watch. And I'm watching them rehearse a Haydn quartet for a concert that they were doing the next day at Lincoln Center. And so they're arguing and they're saying, oh, I think we should do it this way and let's try it that way. And they keep trying different ways. And they're like, so which way are we going to do tomorrow? And they're like, well, let's do it this way. And are we in agreement? Yeah, and they're in agreement. And then Bobby turns to the audience of students and says, it's not going to go that way. So, that flexibility and spontaneity of, we rehearsed it 10 different ways, but who knows how it's really going to go.
Yeah.
That's a good energy, actually. Really good.
We teach at an amazing school, all of us, and we're all blessed for that, I think. And our students are profoundly inspirational and remarkably driven. And we have budding chamber ensembles being formed all the time. And it's great to see our student body taking that initiative. But they're also worried about. The third question we're going to talk about right now is, obviously we know that, you know, if you go to Fish Off or if you go to some of these profoundly high profile chamber music events where there's a competition involved, that that can platform you. If you're a pianist and you do Van Cliburn, you get, you know, you get contracts and you get performances from that. So that's one way to start to get your ensemble's name known so you can start to build a career. The question is, what's some other ways besides the traditional route of just competitions? And Mike, I'll throw this your way.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think it's a mistake for students to think that there's only one path to making it. And I think there's a lot of different ways to get to your goal of being a recognized ensemble, if that's the goal. Even winning something isn't really a guarantee, actually, that you will make it. One thing I remember talking to Larry Dutton from the Emerson String Quartet, and I was like, how did you guys get to be one of the top string quartets around? And he's like, you know, we were playing quartets for many years, and we're all freelancers in New York. Nobody knew who we were or even cared until we got a National Endowment of the Arts grant, and then we were able to put ourselves out there and get you know, publicity and recordings and concerts and things like that. But I think sometimes something like that, like a grant or something, can put you into the world. So obviously promotional materials. I would also say longevity, like the more you're sticking to your product, the more you're getting accepted. And then what is your product? Is your product something anyone cares about? Is it something everybody else is doing? Or is it something really unique and special that will put you on the map just for that product? And lastly, I think maybe the most important thing is just being out there. So you're not going to be an ensemble that anyone knows if you're just practicing all the time and you're locked in a room. You got to be out there. People have to be hearing you. You have to be talking to people, communicating. They have to know who you are. I remember getting gigs in New York just walking down the street. I was like, I need to get out of my apartment, and I just go walking down Broadway, and I bump into somebody, and they're like, hey, do you want to do this gig that's coming up? And I was like, sure. And I went home and I was like, I just marketed myself by walking down Broadway. So it's really, that's sort of a humorous description of, you got to be out there all the time.
Of course, they talked to you because you had a sandwich board on that said "cello for hire," right?
That's right. And ringing a bell too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dane or Keith, anything else on that?
I think, Mike, you just got to be out there. You've got to play. You've got to, you know, start doing. You've got to start performing. You got to set up a performance tour, which leads to a larger performance tour, which leads to a larger performance tour, and maybe eventually management if you're interested in that. But just play.
And everybody starts small, you know. It's not like these great groups just, you know, suddenly appeared overnight. I mean, you go and you play at elementary schools, and you play at nursing homes, and you play at, you know, parks and libraries and all those kinds of places, because that gives you experience doing it, and then you grow from there.
Yeah, those are really valid points, and I think we can all remember playing chamber music in places that we least would expect it, and then somebody comes up to you and says, "That was great. Will you play for this?" And those are great points for our students. And I know that a lot of these groups that are structuring, trying to reach out, one of the things that came up from these students was, how do you reach a certain demographic that may not necessarily get to hear chamber music? I mean, I can remember as a high school student growing up in a very prominent Italian-American city. I hadn't really ever heard a brass quintet in person. And I remember the first time I heard my teacher's group come visit, I was changed forever. So not that I'm in, but how do you hit certain demographics that may not really understand chamber music as we know it, and what can people do to inspire those individuals? I want to throw that to you, Keith, because I know you've done some of those kind of things.
I've got a funny first reaction to that. I think one of the things that you do right off the bat with this idea is to reach the demographic, is to not necessarily present what you're doing as chamber music in that kind of somber classical music sense, which is going to scare off half of your audience automatically. Several thousand years ago, when I was living in Cedar Falls, Iowa, I did a couple of years of a whole lot of performances of a brass trio that we commissioned, actually, and then the next year a septet arrangement of Peter and the Wolf. And I think I've played those two things in pretty much every elementary school within about 200 miles of Cedar Falls, Iowa. And the way that we did it was we got grant money from the union to do that, and also matching funds from the Symphony Guild of the orchestra in Waterloo, Cedar Falls. And that was one of the greatest experiences of my life, honestly. I think if I would look back on my career and say when I felt like I made the most immediate impact on the music business, it was those shows. It was all, whatever, 120 shows that we did, where you would just, like, you could plug yourself into these elementary school kids afterwards and charge yourself up for the next thing that you had to do. I mean, they were so sparked by this stuff because they'd never heard it either.
So I just want to know, were you the bird on a piccolo trumpet?
Yes. Yes, I was.
And then I imagine the duck went to...
Let's see. It might have possibly been the clarinet. I'm not,
Okay.
No, wait. It was,
Oh, wait a minute.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Just
The first thing that we did actually is a show called Penelope, Popocatépetl, and the Three Barbarossas, and it was this brass trio that is absolutely brilliant for kids, and it never failed to be fun. I think we did that show 70 times, and we had a ball every single time, and it was written by a friend of ours that was working at the radio station in town, Peter Hamlin, who was a composer who ended up going on getting his doctorate at Eastman, and he's teaching at a university on the East Coast now. But that also got played in the Kansas City area through young audiences for years and years. But I am telling you, that's probably the most good I've ever done in the world for music, is playing those pieces for those kids, because, God, they would just explode with happiness afterwards.
So what I'm hearing is go where they're at, reach them, have fun, bring joy, and they'll follow.
Have fun, for crying out loud, because there's too much seriousness about every business, but the music business is overwhelmed with seriousness, and this was great stuff.
Yeah, I could hear the joy in your voice just when you're telling about it.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have a follow-up? Or Jane?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to just chime in on a couple of experiences. First of all, when I do outreach, I start with that feeling like I like to think that I'm doing some good for the world. But what winds up happening is I wind up getting something from them. Yep. And they don't realize it. They don't realize what I learned from doing whatever presentation I did. And if I think back, every single place that I've done an outreach has been completely different, and I've gotten something different back out of it. A place where they've never seen classical musicians before. I remember a kid came up to me afterwards and said, "I want to study cello with you." I was like, "Oh, what kind of cello do you have?" He's like, "No, I don't have a cello." "I want to study cello with you." And I was like, I don't live here. I live like 1,200 miles away, you know? And they're like, "Okay, well, what do I do?" You know? And I said, "Well, I guess you got to get a cello and a teacher." And he's like, how much is that going to cost? I'm like, "Well, I guess, you know, you could rent a cello maybe for as little as 25, 35 bucks a month." And he's like, "I think I can afford that. I make 90 bucks a month at my job. I think I can afford to rent a cello," you know? So it's just like, you know, me communicating with this kid who just fell in love with cello, and I'm just, you know, I'm learning from him, because I realized that the world is not looking at me like I'm helping them. They just want to absorb it and enjoy it. So
That's beautiful. Beautiful.
that was probably one of my favorite stories with the cellist who.
Jane, anything, or do you want to field the next question? Because it's
No,
pretty interesting.
I'm good. I was just thinking about all the things that have come up in recent years, that some of which are in our area, in the Kansas City area, and some of which are in other areas of the country and other areas of the world, that sort of target these groups. And one here is the Harmony Project, which reaches out and does lessons and for these underserved demographics. And at the conservatory, we have the Musical Bridges program, which also does the same thing. And then there's the wonderful idea of the El Sistema project, which is, I think, pretty much everywhere in some form or another these days, about reaching those things. So all you really have to do is find out where the underserved populations are, and then, call them up and say, we'd love to come play a concert for you, or we'd love to try to find some grant money to help your students get instruments or lessons. That's not the hardest thing in the world to do. It takes some effort, that's for sure, but there's a lot out there.
Well, yeah, and those are great examples of how the communities are supporting, and people have been catalysts to really bring music to populations that may not necessarily have those opportunities. Mm-hmm. So you all have when I see you speak about it, you're illuminated. And I think we can all share that we love to be able to see that light bulb go on that was me. That was me. I saw it happen. I'm like, I got to do that. So thank you really very much.
So when you're in a chamber ensemble, to operate it, there are 1,000 different variables, right? There's budgets, and there's procuring places to play, and there's choosing repertoire, and balancing programs, and travel, and touring, and meals, and all the above. And there's, of course, I hope one of the main reasons that we're doing this is because we just love music, and we want to share it with other human beings, to other human beings, in a way that's unselfish. Dr. Carl, what are some of the most wonderful things about playing chamber music that aren't the artistic side, the extra personal things that come along with playing chamber music?
Well, there are similar qualities to the ones that I think make you a good musician, a good person, a good whatever. And one of those is just sort of being a good citizen, and taking responsibility for certain aspects of things. Because, as we just said, it's not about just playing the music. That's in many ways the easiest part of the job. Is when you show up and you get to do what you love. The harder parts of the job are arranging the concerts, or finding the funding, or doing some marketing, those kinds of things, being on a board and making those decisions, working with a board to get your artistic vision going. Those are all tricky. And so the best thing I can say about that is probably the same thing that makes you a really good chamber musician is to be a really good citizen with other people, and consider everybody else's opinions, and be considerate about it. And it's the same thing that makes you a good citizen with working in the group. Sometimes we've all played in groups where someone sort of takes over and is bossy and runs the whole show. And lots of times when that's over, we're not the happiest about what we've just done. Part of that's because we don't feel very important. And we all have our own personalities, and some people are more reticent, more shy. I'm secretly shy, and I am actually. And it's you can sort of sense that when you're working with people, and to try to bring them in to the whole, to the consensus. And one of the things being on a board is finding out what the people on a board skills are. What is it that they're good at? What is it that they're willing to contribute and donate? And you don't always know. Sometimes you get someone and they're this, but then you suddenly, they're a lawyer, and suddenly you find out that person also just does some graphic art on the side, and they would be happy to draw a logo for you, or someone they know does. And so it's about connections in a really good, sort of selfless, non-slimy kind of way, and it's about thinking about your own skill set and the skill sets of others, and what you can bring to the table to help. Sometimes it's also about learning a new skill, finding something that maybe you aren't familiar with, but you think you could try and maybe learn to do. And that's the thing I think about being a student that's so wonderful, is that you don't come in sometimes with all that stuff going on, but as you do these things and you grow, you realize you're pretty good at some of them. And that after a while becomes really fun. Like, one of the most really fun things that I do with my chamber group is I get to help program all the concerts. And so we sit around for hours listening to recordings and talking to composers and building these things, and every year. And to me, has become just about as much fun as playing concerts. I think it's really exciting to put those pieces together in a way that when I first started doing it, I probably wasn't nearly as good at, and also not as excited about. And now the idea of how one piece of music interacts with another piece of music is fascinating to me. So I think it's just about good citizenship and figuring out how you can contribute.
Keith, Mike, anyone want to add?
I just wanted to throw in maybe a little tip that I give a lot of my students, and that is related to what Jane is saying, and that is to remember that everyone you come in contact with at school, whether it's teachers, colleagues, other students, friends, everybody in the business, may at some time come back in your life and be helpful. So don't mess it up. That's a major tip related to this question and to what Jane was saying about good citizenship. It really, you may not think it at the time, but you'll be surprised when that person comes back into your life later.
Yeah, it's basically just be a decent human being to everybody. I mean, it isn't that complicated, but I mean, I've got to tell a story about a search that we had a few years ago, actually a long time ago, where one of the applicants for the job came across the pile of applicants, and it was somebody that there was absolutely no chance I was ever going to allow to be in this job in this city because of what kind of a person they were.
How'd I get the job then?
I don't know. Well, I wasn't on the committee at the right time, obviously.
Whoops.
I mean, it's just this the whole simple thing I tell everybody. It's like the person that you're a jerk to is going to be the personnel manager of a chamber orchestra in Connecticut that you try to get a job with, and it's going to be just karma. So, it's really simple. Just be a good person. Be on time. Show up prepared. Don't show up drunk. I mean, all the obvious things that maybe aren't so obvious and weren't so obvious to me when I was 20 years old. It's just that you don't want to learn those things by making mistakes. You want to learn those things by being the best you can be right off the bat.
Well, these are points that I think, so, okay, now I'm someone who wants to create a group and I got to keep it going. And so we got to get someone that is a nice human being. And what's the hardest part of finding these people? So, you all are speaking about these experiences you've had that have been really fruitful. And one of the questions that came out is like, similar desires, similar interests. How do you find compatible schedules? People that feel the same value in maintaining consistent rehearsal schedules. I mean, that's a question that many people have when forming a chamber group. So Mike, I just reaching out to you, any advice, any pointers for people, or where do you reach out? How do you do this?
Mike, can I piggyback on this real quick? Like, there's one aspect of this that I think we might have omitted that we should have talked about at the very beginning. I was speaking today with some high school band directors down in Austin, Texas, and they're really excited about this series, and they want to share it with their program. And we're going to have a bunch of kids down there, one of the best programs in the country that I know is going to be watching these. But even the word chamber music, they might not even know what a ninth grader might not even know what that means. And then how do see if we can hopefully talk about the very basic levels about how to form these things. I think would be really important as well. So.
Yeah, those are good points. And going off of something Keith mentioned in the beginning, which was chamber music group is like a marriage. So if you're looking for someone to marry, you probably want to date a little first.
There you go.
So what do you do? How do you date? I guess you're gonna read some chamber music together, get to know each other. Maybe it's not in school. Maybe it's just you know, playing together. Also talking about what your desires are to be in a group, or what your goals are in music. And you might find you gravitate towards people who you like their playing, or they like your playing, or things like that. I think in the not in the really young world, but in the more professional world, I think there's a lot of word of mouth when groups are getting put together, if there's people you don't know. But it goes back to what I was saying earlier about being out there. When you're out there, you're meeting people. And when you're doing things like reading music with people, you're getting to know a larger group. And sometimes you just go out for a little food afterwards, and you start talking. You're like, hey, this was so much fun. Let's keep doing it and see what happens. And hey, let's get serious. And it has to go in steps. You don't just see someone on the street and say, are you single? Let's get married.
Well, okay. Those are a great analogy that I think everyone will take to heart.
Yeah.
Well, you know, too, I mean, the thing about, well, we keep saying chamber music, but chamber music, for most of us, for many of us, especially the wind players, grew out of the idea of solo and ensemble, and what small ensemble you're going to take to solo and ensemble, and what piece you're going to play, and which lots of times is who are your friends. And that's kind of where that starts. And, you know, I mean, not all friendships were you know, solidified by chamber music, but a lot of them were. And so in the summer festival that I have, we have people that have been coming back for and playing with us for 20 some years who were friends of mine in college. And that's one of the ways they you know, got into the group. You know, we need a X, Y, or Z, and we know that and so who do you know that would be a good person to call to do that? And sometimes if someone isn't locally available, and we know that right away, or the person who's locally available doesn't seem like a good fit, or isn't interested, or is on vacation that week, whatever, since our thing is mostly in the summer, then you start calling your friends, and you start that dialogue. And that was, to me, also one of the most fun things about playing chamber music in college. I think playing with a lot of different people, but also discovering who maybe not always my close personal friends, but who my musical friends were.
So I had an individual in the house, and this is related to Steve's point. I had an individual in the house today, an electrician, and I told him what I do, and I said, we get to do a session tonight on chamber music. Okay? So I found this daunting, because he went, what's that? So you're in an elevator, and you're going up one floor, and somebody says, tell me what chamber music is. Ready, go. Mike.
Music that is played in a small room.
Keith. You'll see where I'm getting. Keith.
Yeah, I do. A small group of friends playing music together.
Jane.
It's more than one person, and
Right.
it's fewer than an army. So probably, you know, 10 to 12. After that, I start thinking about it differently.
Okay, so I hit all of this, and he goes, so you mean like the Grateful Dead?
Yes.
And I was like, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, right. So I had to, yes, right. And it just blew my mind, because it's chamber music, I guess.
If we're a younger person watching this, you might, usually chamber music is one person per part. So when you're in your bands or your orchestras, there might be 25 violins, or there might be
Right.
12 trumpets sitting back there, and you get engaged in a whole sections playing versus the individuality. And some people might say, why in the world are the two band directors at UMKC wanting to have a session on chamber music?
Right.
And for me, everything we do has to stem from that, because that's where the most growth happens. And annually, I will just say I meet with the members of the Wind Symphony, and if they're new to school, I ask them a couple questions. And one of the questions I always ask them is, how is this ensemble ever going to be better because you're a member of it? That's the first question. Their eyes go like this. And then the second question I ask is, what's your plan when you come to rehearsal? What are you going to bring to rehearsal? What opinions are you going to bring to rehearsal? And then they're like, opinions? You know, I'm waiting. You're supposed to give me the opinion. And then I will share. I can't get to all the opinions. There's no way I can share every phrase of every section of every piece and every nuance. And the principal players have roles. And then, we go through all that. We talk about that in the room. And then I talk about chamber music. And I say, if we're going to be as great an ensemble as we can be potentially, it's going to have to stem from the individuality of the members of this ensemble, and it's going to have to come, the energy. Joe and I are going to give you a ton of energy, but the bulk of the energy is going to have to come from within if we're ever going to achieve greatness. So if you're a younger student, you're going to really grow in ways that that's going to be different than what your band directors might be telling you. You're going to discover things on your own, and I think that's so beautiful as well. So I just wanted to mention that in case people are just wondering what chamber music is.
I think another important aspect is that the greatest musical experiences that you ever have always feel like chamber music, even when they're not. Mm-hmm. If you're in the middle of having a great orchestra concert, or just even sitting in the sections that you're not even playing, you realize that people around you are playing chamber music with each other. And that collective feeling of, ooh, we're all in the same place together, we're all on the same page. It's about the coolest thing you can do.
It is.
That's awesome. That's well said. Yeah. I can remember those moments, sitting there and going, I could be 100 people on stage and I'm just in this little bubble of like, what's happening? This is amazing.
This is a more pragmatic question. Dr. Carl, how do you find venues and places to perform and draw a substantial audience?
Well, drawing a substantial audience is always tricky. It's tricky, I think, for anything that we consider it classical music or art music or whatever you call it. I think it's a little trickier because people don't have the word fun and always, that's not their first association when you say classical music or art music. So I think we have to go out of our way to show them how much fun things can be. And that can be in conventional ways or unconventional ways. There are lots of ways to make an audience interested in you. And things that my group has done in the past several years, one of the things that we instituted a while ago is just talking to the audience during the concert. So instead of just going up and having it be sort of the drier, we walk on stage, we play a piece, everyone claps, we go off, and then the next piece happens. We talk before the concert, we talk in between pieces now while the stage is being reset. We have people going out talking about the next piece. We've started to incorporate visual elements. We've started working with slideshows and things. I played a concert once, a chamber music concert with Friends of Chamber Music here in town, where there was a lot special lighting that was done during the piece. That was really interesting. So there can be a lot of ways to get people, I think, engaged during the concert. Finding venues it can be really hard and it can be really easy. Almost anything can be a venue. And what I've learned during this COVID time, and I've played some of these concerts with people, is that a driveway can be a very substantial venue, and a front porch, and a front yard, and a backyard, because since people don't feel safe congregating indoors anymore at this particular time, what are we going to do? And so many of my friends have been advertising their concerts on, I think it's called Nextdoor. Something like that. Right. Yeah. Yeah, you can read about all sorts of stuff on there, but you can also see these announcements, in front of my house at this time, on this date. Bring your lawn chair, will be, set up in a socially distanced manner. And I've played some of these concerts and gone to these concerts, and that's a great way just to get people interested in you. But other good ways are to sort of think about venues and think out of the box like that and start calling up places. Would you be interested in having us come to blah, 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 blah? the chamber music groups from the Kansas City Symphony are now playing it in parks on the weekends and at farmers markets and places like that. And as long as the weather holds up, you know, all these things are good. So again, places like schools and libraries and any kind of public setting, and it doesn't have to feel you know, incredibly formal. You don't have to have people, you know, dressing up and worrying about where they're going to park. So you just think out of the box.
Can I piggyback on the first part of what you were talking about? I think engaging the audience is always a challenge, but I think there's something that we're sort of assuming that is going unsaid that I think is really important, and that is just making absolutely completely sure that you are 1,000,000% committed to what you're doing, and that you're doing it for the audience, not for yourselves. Chamber music can be a little bit of an enclave of self-awareness, and you've got to try to project what you're doing to the hearts of the people that are out there. And you know, you can hear any kind of music, or I hope that if it's presented with commitment and passion and played well, I'm going to have a good time. I can also hear perfectly played music where it's just like I don't care, and I'll walk away feeling completely unfulfilled. I think the only real way to reach an audience is to play with so much passion that they can't miss what you're doing, that they're completely convinced that you meant every word. I have to say this, I got the nicest compliment I've ever had in my life after a trumpet and organ concert. It was from Jenna White, Jenna Van Gel now, came up to me and said very quietly to me, I feel like every note you play has some kind of hidden meaning. And I teared up. That was the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me, because that's the whole thing for me. And if you can reach people like that, then you've done your job. And boy, is it ever fun on top of that. I mean, so sorry I stole the topic away, but I just think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I would just say the formality doesn't have to be so formal. You know, we've done concerts in restaurants, and we have had menus, and it was next door to a tobacco shop, and we found pieces that had tobacco in the title. And then we found out that people drank hot chocolate, and this piece went with hot chocolate in X country. And so we just tried to build these connections, and pretty soon we sold one concert, then we sold another concert, then we sold another concert, and people wanted to be at it. And I do want to mention one thing. I know this isn't my panel, but it's always resonated with me. My teacher, Craig Kirchhoff, University of Minnesota, when I was there, we had a concert, and we had a concert where we allowed people on the stage to sit in the group. And I'll never forget. Someone after the concert said, you know, I was on stage and I saw the musicians breathing, and I could feel it and I could sense it. And I always felt like there was this wall between me and musicians, that's what the other people do. And we're concertizing in the 18th century modality with these long shoebox halls, and I'm 200 feet from the musicians on the stage, and I'm supposed to bow in honoring of them, but I don't feel a part of it. And I think that's one of the really great things about the we factor of chamber music with both the players and the ensemble is really beautiful, and it's totally inspiring. And especially if we're going to make the world more connected for those people that aren't musicians, they're going to feel like they're in it more. And someone once told me it's not about what they think, it's about what they feel if we're going to make lasting impressions. So yeah. Whatever that's worth.
One of my favorite things is the house concert.
Yeah.
And people don't believe it, but they're worried. Like, I don't mind if someone's almost sitting on my lap while I'm playing, like it's that close. I love it because even in between movements, they might be like, well, you know, what were you doing there? You know, you can interact, like they're just sitting right next to you or in front of you. I actually love that, even though they think that you need your space. But I think they need to be involved in the show.
You know, a lot of this music, this chamber music, a lot of this new music at the time was written to be entertainment or to be in a corner playing. And you know, I don't, then we started to add formality to it, I guess. I mean, that's not always the case for some of it, but you know, I think one of the challenges we have in current society is reaching as many people as possible. And all of you have alluded to ways to do that, whether it's through some kind of stage lighting, or what I've even heard from Jane that I think is one of our future topics is being able to have good public speaking skills. And then from everybody, how to draw the audience into your experience by whether you have very informative program notes that make a transfer to something that they do. And I know that's really important. And then to make something that's connected to something real. And a lot of us, and Keith, I'm going to throw this to you. I know you've commissioned a lot of new music. And I know that a lot of the music you've commissioned is sometimes extremely programmatic. So I'm just curious, as you prepare that kind of repertoire, and we have another panel coming up with composers, but what kind of interaction, what thought process, how do you think I want to ask this composer and do this piece, or what parts have to be in place for you to do that?
This just became a 6-hour panel discussion. Oh my God.
You can come back for the other one.
I'm going to have to. I mean, I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. I mean, wow. I'll preface it by saying Melody and I have commissioned maybe 15 pieces by this time. And it's a really fascinating process because every single piece is a different process somehow. There's different things that happen. And early on, we were just sort of begging people to write music for us because we thought that was a cool idea. And I really don't think that was the worst way to start this, because let's just expand the repertoire, and maybe in the process we find we commission a piece that becomes a really important part of the repertoire, or moves some people in some way or something. But as we've gotten a little more selective, and we've sort of gone a little bit bigger with the composers that we asked, it's kind of just about being not afraid to ask a composer to write you a piece, even if it's somebody that you've been aware of since you were in high school. I mean, just send them an email. You can get in touch with everybody, and you just have nothing to lose by saying, would you be interested in writing a piece for this ensemble?
So can I interrupt and ask you, so what's different from that than doing like the Haydn trumpet concerto for a chamber group? Like when you guys look at chamber music that's new, what is different in preparing that compared to something you've just commissioned?
Honestly, I think the best part of it that's different is the fact that there is no template. There is no recording. You can't, I'm going to say this word advisedly, but you can't cheat by listening to 6 recordings of something and just play it like a mixture of those 6 recordings. But you have to make your own decisions, and I love that part of this process. Most of the time, some of the music we've commissioned has been just about like right up on the edge of being physically impossible, and that particular part of the process has not always been fun. But I mean, I just love finding what's in that ink on a paper that's going to be interesting, and finding what's going to be communicatable to an audience. And we've also gotten a little bit better at finding composers that are going to write pieces that are, how do I put this? Somebody help me. That are going to be more profound. I'll just say that. It sounds kind of pompous, but pieces that have meaning beyond being kind of an interesting piece of music. I mean, the elephant in the room here is the latest CD that Melody and I did. Is basically a dedication to my son that we lost to leukemia 10 years ago. And we tried to find people that would speak to that in the music that they wrote for us. And boy, I think we succeeded really remarkably well, and especially in 2 or 3 of the cases on this CD that are hard for me to play. They're so emotionally intense. But you have to find out where that stuff is in the music, and you don't have previous knowledge to draw on. And I kind of like being out there by myself, trying to figure out how to do new things. And it's one of my favorite things as a musician. So I mean, you still have to do all your nuts and bolts work. You still have to have the metronome on permanently for about 2 months for every piece and make sure that you know where everything goes. And then you can start, what I love about this too, is then you can start having FaceTime conversations with composers and say, would it be okay if we went this direction with this phrase? What do you think about, can we maybe change this to make this moment be more explosive or more something? And that's just an unbelievably rewarding thing, is to get to have these like back and forth conversations with composers. I really love doing that. And most of the time the composer is just going to say, yeah, let's try that. I mean, there's different styles of composers that we've worked with. Jim Oberly, our colleague, just has been wonderful with the 2 pieces he wrote for us. Sam Adler, my old friend Sam, is a different style of composer. It's very much more old school. After the premiere of his most recent piece for us, he was here for it. I went up to him and I said, Sam, I am really sorry to have to do this, but I can't play this last page without dying. And I'm going to have to ask you if there's any way you can give me a little bit of space to breathe and a little bit of rest. And I love Sam to death. He's one of my favorite human beings, but his reaction was kind of funny because he was sort of like, well, I guess I will if I really have to. And then literally 3 days later, he sent a revised last page that gave me 2 beats of rest. So there you are. It's Sam Adler, so you just do what's written, and you don't argue with him about it anymore. But even that is kind of fun because those are just like different rules that you have to go by.
I can imagine the connection with our students to this. I'm just speculating, and when they see when the ensembles are commissioning the most famous people in the world to write a piece, and the cost with that is really frightening when a chamber music ensemble finds out that, oh, these people might charge $20,000 or whatever. But it doesn't have to start there. So I'm speaking directly to our conservatory students. You are sitting in classes. There's 80 composers at our conservatory. You are in the desk next to them. Talk to them. Get off of your thumbs. Quit texting your other friends and actually speak to them.
Make sure you have a mask on.
Yes. And build some relationships.
Yeah.
And you might have lifetime friends. You might build a lifetime relationship that will be the most unbelievable thing ever. And the cost of that, they're learning their craft too. You can learn these things together. It's going to be just a wonderful, wonderful way to start. So that would be the way I would begin.
Amen, my friend.
And not every new piece is going to be wonderful. That's another thing about this. It's just like there's no 100% success rate. But I think we have to be, if we're going to keep music alive and keep music vibrant and changing and growing, we have to be a part of this process that the European icons have already been through. There was 700 other pieces written at the same time as Haydn Symphony No. whatever, but they've all faded away because they weren't brilliant. So I think we need to contribute to that process. And if some of the time the piece isn't great, well, okay, you tried. You played it a couple of times, it got, it didn't get a good review and you didn't enjoy playing it for whatever reason, it didn't connect with you, that's okay. That's part of the process. It's all right. But then you come along and you get, pieces that are profoundly moving or there's a couple of pieces on this CD that are going to be things that I play the rest of my life with my friend Melody. I mean, every concert we play, we're going to have to play these things because they're so profound and so wonderful. So we got lucky,
Coming towards the here to our final question. Joe, I saw you were about to say something.
Well, no, I think it ties into this last question. So, I mean, here's, do you mind if because it made me think about it. So here's our professors who've all invested in chamber music. Keith has commissioned music that represents a struggle that he's gone through in his life that some of us can't even comprehend. And so this question came up a lot from our students, and it's the typical question. It's the balance question. So we're going to ask all of you, and I'd like to start with Mike. So and sorry, Steve, it just struck me because he had talked just recently about that. How do you balance this gig of being a professor and keeping your chops up and performing at such a high level like all of you do, with everything from Aspen, the St. Louis Symphony, to the Mahler Festival, to doing CDs? I mean, you all are heralded for what you do, yet you teach you teach all week, and you have spouses, you do all these things. So our students want to know, is there a magic way to do this? Mike, all
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah, it's 40, 40, 20. No, I'm just kidding.
Best in joke ever.
Our students
Okay.
may not know what 40-40-20 is. But just, as professors, we're evaluated in three areas: 40% teaching, 40% scholarship, they call it, and then 20% service. So, and it's kind of a joke because we all do
That's why we're laughing.
90, 90, 90.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just thought,
All right, here we go.
just thought I'd throw that in there. But yeah, I thought about this question a lot, and everybody's a little different. Some people come to a teaching position with a skew a little bit towards performing, and they enjoy a little teaching. Some people come with a skew of like they're primarily wanting to teach and be focused on pedagogy, and they want to perform at the same time. The key, the bottom line is that I think both the teaching and performing serve each other, and they go hand in hand. So you become a better teacher from the performing experience, you become a better performer from teaching. I know I learned a lot over the last 15 years, expressing and teaching and working with students, learning from them as well as what they got from me. And it totally changed my playing. So I think they go hand in hand. And so the question then comes up of balance. And I really do feel like everyone's a little different in that. The bottom line, though, is it makes it a full life, and it makes it very, very busy. You have to practice. I have to practice. I can't really function without practicing. And yes, the days are full doing the 40-20 part, the service to the school, plus also the teaching hours. And then you have to devote time to all the things we talked about today, which are building, the audiences and working on programs and perfecting them so they can be presented, making recordings. All this stuff it fills up all your spare time. But that's why they tell you when you're a student, at least I hope they tell other students, like I had heard when I was, that you better love this and you have to love this. Because to love it means you're going to do it all the time on weekends, at nights. You're not going to really feel like there's a vacation from it necessarily.
I get asked this all the time, and I got tired of being asked the question because I always, as soon as I would hear a lecture on balance, and then I would go get a self-help book, and it would say do these 10 things, and I would try the 10 things, and then I was more stressed than I'd ever been in my life because it wasn't resonating with my DNA, and I finally just put it all away, and I said, okay, I need to do the things where the universe's magnet draws me to, and then it's not work. So if I'm pulled in that direction, then the hours go by and I don't even realize that they were happening. So work-life balance to me has always been just find things you love and enjoy that journey, and then you'll be a happier person, and then you'll have more to give back, and you'll never go to work. And that's what I think is important for all of us. Mike and Jane, or Jane and Keith, anything else?
I think that we're constantly always rebalancing, juggling every day. Every day is a different experience. And I say that to my students just about finding practice times, right? The time you practice on Tuesday isn't going to be same time you practice on Friday, because your life's going to be different that day. Your schedule is going to be different. And none of us went into this thinking, oh, this is a wonderful 9-to-5 job that I will put away and then go home in the evening and have dinner and do whatever. It's not that kind of life. And I think that you see that so much as a student, and it's kind of like a really good drug. You either get addicted to that constant action that goes on with it, or you say, wow, this isn't for me. This is too much, because it's really hard to have a balanced life in this lifestyle. It's tough, and it changes all the time. And there are times when you're just crazy busy, and you're feeling like you're scheduling a bathroom break. Yeah, well, or I I have this 10 minutes to eat my sandwich and then we're on, you know, and all that stuff is true. And then I have to race here and do this. And we've all lived that life a lot. And part of it's because we do love it and we do feed off from it. And I think this COVID time has been such an interesting time of reflection because it's forced us all to step back, because we can't do that craziness that we were doing before. It's a different craziness, but it's not the same intense running around, constant interaction, you know, running from gig to teaching to whatever. It's interesting what it sort of brings to all of us, what it makes us all notice, and I look forward to getting back to some sort of normal life at some point, I hope, but it's also good to sit here for a while and reflect about it, I think. It makes you appreciate it better.
Any final words from everybody?
I'm gonna add something to that changed everything for me about 15 years ago, and that's when we had children. Because I thought I was busy before we had children, and then I think what that did to me was maybe the best thing that's ever happened to me. Is it got me out of my own kind of obsessive desire to be, you know, the best whatever I was being at that given moment, and made me understand that the most important thing in the universe is not playing trumpet beautifully, but it's being a really good person, or trying to be a really good person, and then just especially trying to not screw up your offspring too much, you know. So what that did to me is it forced me in a really healthy way to rebalance all that stuff and take a fairly high percentage of the time that I was spending being a trumpet player and turn it into something that was actually way better for me, which was being a dad. And my kids inspire me to be a better person. My students inspire me to be a better person and a player. So that's just a whole nother world that honestly 20 years ago I would have never dreamed this was going to happen to me. But it's the best possible thing. The only thing that matters to me anymore, you've all heard me say this, the only thing that matters to me anymore is that I raise good human beings as kids. If I never got to play trumpet again, I had to throw it away in order to be a better father when I needed to, I would do that in a heartbeat. This is a strange thing to end this conversation with, but I think it's about perspective about what's really important. And I keep coming back to this same thing over and over again, and just the human interaction and being a good person. That's the main thing. Nothing else really matters.
I want to say you all have inspired me, and this time has gone by quickly, but I will say that somebody taught me years ago to focus on the quality of time and not necessarily the quantity of time of when you're with people. So like even this hour that we were just spending together, I've grown immensely, you know, and when I'm done, I will go spend quality time with people that haven't seen me today, you know, and I'm not gonna worry about how much, but I've got to make sure I'm on task to it. So I thank you all. You're amazing. And Professor Davis, I can't tell you how much I appreciate having this opportunity to do this. Our kids are very fortunate. You guys, very fortunate. So
I just want to, and as we wrap this up, Mike, did you have any final thing, Mike, or you okay? I just want to, if I've worked with three of these people on this panel for 15 years, and I've worked with one of the people on this panel for a handful of years. But I will tell you that we've all been sequestered, right? And we're getting out of this sequestering, and just, I know as you observe this panel that you're going to be inspired, because there's no way if you're in the presence of all four of these other people that you're not going to be a better person at the end of it. My highest respect for everyone in this room. I'm profoundly thankful that you've taken some time, one, to work here with our kids, and two, to give this hour, and three, just to be the people that you are, is really uplifting to me and necessary for me right now. I've been struggling, as I think a lot of people have, and I'm starting to get the swagger in my step again, which is because of these kind of conversations, and you've inspired me and motivated me. So I hope that's happening to everybody in this room. I hope it's happening to everybody that's observing this. Know that you have friends here in Kansas City. We're humbled, we're honored, we're thankful that you're taking time out of your life to observe these. Don't hesitate to come back and watch the next one next week. It's on military band with four outstanding guests on that panel. And I'm sure you've seen the other poster that talks about the other 10 sessions that we're going to be sharing. I think we're going to grow so immensely through this whole process. And again, to everyone that's watching, I know I speak on behalf of everybody. We're profoundly thankful that you've given some time for us. And have a nice rest of your day or evening or whatever the case may be. Cheers.